Welcome to episode 26 of the Resurrection Podcast. I am Acusio Bivona. I'm recording this audio on a Monday morning, exactly one day after Easter Sunday. By the time this releases and hits your feed, we'll be over a week removed from the holiday. But the timing is highly intentional. Over that weekend, millions of people observed the concept of resurrection. For the vast majority of the civilian world, it's a historical or spiritual concept. It's a holiday, a family dinner, or for some, it's just a date on the calendar. But if you're a high-level operator, if you're a man carrying the weight of a business, a payroll, and a family, resurrection isn't just a holiday. It's a strict operational mandate. It's a complete mental and physical alignment. About 7.5 months ago, I executed a massive strategic pivot in my own brand. I stripped away the old titles and I planted my flag completely. I claimed the title of the Resurrection Coach and I built this exact podcast around that specific word. And today, we're going to look under the hood of that decision. We're going to look at exactly why I chose that specific framework, and more importantly, why it's the exact blueprint your life as an executive currently demands. We're not talking about religion today. We're talking about human performance, personal integrity, and the absolute necessity of letting a weak, inefficient version of yourself die so the formidable version can take the wheel. So let's look at the exact origin of this title and why it's the only framework that actually works for a man in your position. For the last decade, I've operated in the trenches with high net worth founders and executives as a fitness and nutrition coach. In the earliest iterations of my business, my entire identity was built around just being that. Men would come to me when their system, especially their bodies, was actively on fire. Their physical health was collapsing, and for anyone that's been in my position, personal trainers can often be personal therapists. So I would often find too that in conjunction with their physical health, their marriage was violently fracturing, or their business was consuming 100% of their energy and leaving them completely hollowed out. They would hire me to step into the burning building that was their physical health, locate the friction, put the fire out, and get them back to work. And I was good at it. But over time, as I started to evaluate the long-term results, I began to identify a massive fatal flaw in that coaching model. I noticed a pattern. The men that I quote unquote fixed were often coming back 18 months later. Their business had scaled, they were in a higher tax bracket, but they were dealing with the exact same burnout, the exact same marriage friction, and the exact same physical exhaustion, ironically. Why? Because what I discovered is when you treat a highly complex man like a broken machine that just needs a quick repair, I was setting him up for a long-term failure, and I didn't recognize it at the time. I was treating the symptoms, but not the foundation. You can give a stressed executive a new morning routine. You can fix his diet, and you can buy him a few more quarters of high-level output. But if his foundational operating system, the core way he views himself and his responsibilities, is flawed, the engine is eventually going to blow again. It's really only a matter of time. Highly intelligent, highly capable men don't need a Band-Aid. And they don't need to be fixed. Because fixing implies taking the exact same tired, compromised, exhausted executive and just giving him a slightly better paint job. It's like dropping a brand new high-performance transmission into a rusted out suspension or chassis, whatever it's called. I'm not a car guy. The sheer power of the new parts will eventually tear the old frame apart. So to permanently change the trajectory of a man's life, I couldn't just repair the old machine. I had to execute a complete system reboot. You have to tear the old foundation down to the studs and build a completely new, undeniable structure that can actually support the massive weight of your future. That wasn't going to be possible with the coaching that I was doing. Because what I recognized is that is exactly what a resurrection is. And to fully understand this framework, you have to accept the absolute harshest reality of building a highly capable man. Before resurrection can occur, something has to die. And that means that you can't hold on to the comfort of your old habits and expect to step into a completely new caliber of execution. You have to willingly clear the space. The version of you that operates on 4 hours of sleep and calls it dedication, the version of you that swallows his stress and brings a rigid, exhausted presence home to his wife, or the version of you that constantly negotiates with his own physical standards, that version of you has to be permanently retired. You have to willingly put that outdated operating system into the ground. And truthfully, most executives absolutely refuse to do this. The psychological resistance is massive. Why? Because the ego is entirely tied to that old, exhausted version of themselves. That specific version of them, the guy who ignored his health and worked 80-hour weeks, is the exact same guy who built the company and made the millions. So your brain looks at your bank account, looks at your title, and assumes that your current process is flawless. The ego tells you that if you let go of that old, highly stressed identity, you'll lose your edge. So when the pressure spikes and your health or your marriage starts to fail, you don't change the foundation. You just try to bolt new strategies onto the old failing system. You try to run a massive, high-performance 2026 enterprise using a set of personal rules you wrote a decade ago when you were just trying to survive. The system's gonna crash. So the men who actually win, the men who build an undeniable physical presence, command absolute respect in the boardroom, and walk into their homes as grounded, powerful fathers, are the men who recognize that when a system has reached the end of its lifespan. They don't cling to an old playbook. They look at their own weakness, they accept the hard truth, and they willingly let the compromised version of themselves step down. And they don't view it as a loss. They view it as a necessary evolution. They cleared the space. And in that space, they build the foundation of the man they're actually required to be. So what happens the moment you decide to retire that old, exhausted version of yourself? Unfortunately, it's not an immediate, seamless transition. You don't just wake up the next morning perfectly dialed in. When you finally pull the plug on the old system, there's a distinct gap before the new system fully boots up. I like to call this an operational vacuum. For a highly successful man, this vacuum is terrifying. Just absolutely terrifying. Because you've been addicted to your own chaos for the last decade. You've trained yourself to equate stress with progress. If your heart rate isn't elevated and your inbox isn't actively on fire, your brain tells you that you're just falling behind. But let's look at what happens when you finally enforce a boundary. You stop answering emails at 11 p.m. You stop taking Sunday morning calls to deal with minor employee issues. You stop relying on sheer adrenaline and forced urgency to survive the afternoon. Everything suddenly gets very quiet. And in that quiet, your ego starts to scream at you. It whispers that you're getting soft. Or I guess I should say it yells that you're getting soft. It tells you that you're losing your edge and your competitors are catching up. You sit on the couch with your family on a Saturday, and instead of being present, your skin crawls because you feel like you should be doing something. That vacuum is precisely where most men break, because they can't handle the stillness. They feel incredibly vulnerable without the stress. So they consciously or subconsciously sabotage the peace. They manufacture a crisis. They pick a fight, or they create a fake emergency at work. They run right back into the burning building because even though, and they may know that the fire is destroying them, the heat is familiar. And we are conditioned to always run to what we find to be familiar. They would rather be exhausted and comfortable than step into the quiet unknown. But the men who actually step up to the next tier of their life understand the vacuum is required. They hold the line. They recognize that the anxiety is just withdrawal from the chaos. They allow the quiet to exist, and they use that space to take a brutally honest look at what actually needs to be built. You have to survive the vacuum to earn the process of rebuilding. And this brings us to the core of why I claim this specific title and why it's the only standard that matters. When you make it through the vacuum, you don't just put the old pieces back together. You rebuild for one specific non-negotiable standard: the ultimate alignment. As a high-level operator, you use your success in one box to justify your complete failure in another. You tell yourself, I just closed a massive Q3 deal, so it doesn't matter if I haven't been to the gym in a month. Or, I provide a 7-figure lifestyle for my family, so it's okay if my marriage is currently sitting on the back burner. You've accepted a fractured standard. You've allowed yourself to win in the business category by actively stealing energy from your physical health and your relationships. You're rich on paper, but you're bankrupt in your own body. I, as the resurrection coach, don't accept a fractured standard. We do not negotiate with blind spots. The ultimate alignment means that the man who commands absolute respect in a high-stakes board meeting is the exact same caliber of man who walks through the front door to his wife and kids. He doesn't take off his strength when he goes home. He simply changes the application of it. His physical presence, his emotional energy, and his business execution are all running on the exact same high-level operating system. There is no more hiding behind your net worth to justify your physical decline. There is no more faking your presence at the dinner table while your mind is entirely at the office. You build a baseline where your words, your physical actions, and your daily calendar are a perfect match. When you achieve this level of alignment, you stop leaking energy. You become a complete, unified force. Your presence becomes entirely undeniable in every single room you enter because there are no more contradictions in your character. That is the standard of a resurrection. Going back to the timing of this episode and why I told you that recording this the day after Easter was highly intentional. If we're going to use the word resurrection, we need to look at the actual historical event of Jesus Christ. If you strip away the pastel colors, the commercial side of the holiday, and the comfortable Sunday morning routines, and you look at the raw actual series of events, you're looking at the ultimate example for the exact transformation we're talking about today. Look at the timeline. It operates in 3 distinct unbreakable steps. First, there's Friday, which is celebrated now as Good Friday. Friday is the sacrifice. It's violent, it's public, and it is the agonizing death of the physical body. In my framework, Friday is the exact moment you finally admit that your current way of operating is destroying you. It's the moment you stop defending your bad habits, you stop making excuses, and you willingly let that exhausted, highly stressed version of yourself step down. It's you paying the price. Then there was Saturday. Saturday was the tomb. A heavy stone is rolled across the entrance. And there's absolute pitch black silence. There's no audience. There's no praise. And there's no forward movement. That's the ultimate operational vacuum. It's the terrifying gap between what you used to be and what you're going to become. And finally, there's Resurrection Sunday. Sunday is the literal resurrection. The stone is rolled away, and it's the return of the man. But he isn't just revived. He's operating on a completely new, undeniable standard. He is unbroken. It's the ultimate alignment of the physical man and the spiritual man. So here's the massive blind spot for most highly successful men. You want the absolute power of Sunday, but you are completely unwilling to endure the silence of Saturday, and you refuse to pay the price of Friday. You want the strong physical presence, the undeniable respect in your business, and the deep connection with your wife, but you refuse to let your ego die. You try to use your money to buy a Sunday result, and you try to skip the tomb. The historical event proves an absolute truth. You can't bribe the timeline. You can't skip a step. You can't bypass the tomb and expect to experience the resurrection. So what does it actually look like for a man to enter the tomb in 2026? It doesn't require you to fly to a spiritual retreat, sit in a circle, or spend a month in the mountains. It just requires a brutal, immediate look at your own reality, right inside your own home. Entering the tomb means you intentionally strip away every single thing you use to prop up your ego. You turn off your phone and hand it to your wife. You step completely away from the inbox. You take off the expensive watch. You ignore the balance in your bank account, and you stand in front of the mirror as just a man. No titles. No leverage. No employees to give you a sense of authority. You are stripped down to the bare reality of what you have built and what you have allowed to decay. For 48 hours, you don't manufacture any chaos to distract yourself. You don't pour a drink to numb the heavy feeling in your chest. You don't snap at your kids or start an argument just to feel a sense of control. You sit in the absolute, uncomfortable quiet of your own reality. And you will literally feel the physical withdrawal of not having a crisis to solve. Your brain will scream at you to grab your phone, to check the market, to go do something that makes you feel important again. But you have to ignore it. You look at the 30 pounds of excess weight. You look at the distance between you and your wife. You accept the total sum of the damage without making a single fucking excuse about how hard you work to provide. You don't blame the economy, and you don't blame your board of directors. You own it. You let that fragile, ego-driven version of yourself starve in the dark. Because when you finally accept the reality of the tomb, when you stop fighting the quiet and completely surrender the old playbook, the vacuum is finally clean because you've stopped running. The old system is gone. And only then, in that clean space, are you cleared to finally rebuild the machine. Now let's look at what happens when Sunday finally arrives. When you survive the quiet of the tomb, and you finally let that old exhausted ego die, the heavy stone rolls away. You step back into the light of your life, but you're absolutely not the same man who walked into the dark. You're in the process of achieving the ultimate alignment. You don't pick up the old heavy habits. You don't return to your business on Monday morning and start creating unnecessary stress just to feel productive. Because you face the absolute quiet, you no longer need the noise of a crisis to feel important or valuable. You walk into the boardroom, and your presence is completely different. You're no longer running on fear, adrenaline, or the desperate, exhausting need to prove your worth to your board or your competitors. You're operating from a foundation of absolute, quiet strength. So the next time a massive problem hits your desk, like a deal falling through or an employee making a critical error, you don't react. You don't raise your voice or lose your temper. You observe the reality. You decide on the correct path, and you move. Your team feels that unshakable foundation immediately. They stop walking on eggshells around you, and they start following your lead. Then, the real test happens. When you drive home. Because you're no longer burning massive amounts of energy all day trying to hold up a fake, stressed out image of yourself, you actually have energy left for the people who matter most. You walk through your front door, and you don't bring the heavy burden of the office with you. You are completely present. Your wife feels the physical reality of a man who is entirely secure in who he is. You don't need her to manage your mood or fix your stress. You are a steady, undeniable anchor for your family. You've stopped trying to patch a failing machine. You've let the weak version of yourself go, and you have resurrected the man you were always meant to be. I'm going to go ahead and start wrapping this up. I claim the title of the Resurrection Coach because I absolutely refuse to help men put Band-Aids on bullet holes. I refuse to take your money just to give you a cheap morning routine or a quick trick to help you survive another week in a burning building. If you're a highly successful man carrying the weight of a business and a family, your life demands a massive, unbreakable foundation. You cannot afford to be fragile. Right now, you're standing at a very specific crossroads, and you have a choice. You can continue to run the old playbook. You can keep pushing the old failing system until your physical health completely collapses, or your marriage quietly ends, or your business finally breaks you under the weight of your own stress. You can try your hardest to avoid the tomb. Or you can make the difficult, necessary choice. You can admit that the old way is dead. You can step into the quiet, face the harsh reality of what needs to change, and finally build your ultimate alignment. If you're ready to let the old system go and build a foundation that cannot be broken by the market or by gravity, it's time to make the move. Go to CoachKuz.com and apply for the Resurrection Strategy Call. I will be the man in your corner. We will strip away the noise and the excuses. We will find exactly where your old system is failing you, and we will build the exact non-negotiable standards of the resurrection protocol into your daily life. We will guide you through the quiet, and we will build the man who commands respect in every single room he enters. Don't run from the quiet. Step into it. Tune the engine. Rebuild the machine. Resurrect the man. I am Acusio Bivona, and I will see you in the work.